Hi, Plain English listeners. A quick message before this episode. It's that time of year again. We're going to have some Black Friday specials this year, and I don't want you to miss them. Now, I don't have all the details finished yet, but I wanted to give you the chance to be the first to know about the promotion when it comes out. So if you're interested in upgrading your English in 2025, go to plainenglish.com/black, BLACK. Enter your details there, and you'll be the first to know about what we're doing this Black Friday. Sound good? plainenglish.com/black, plainenglish.com/BLACK. He's back. Here's how Donald Trump pulled off his improbable upset. Hi there, everyone. It's Jeff, and this is Plain English, episode number 730 for November 25th, 2024. Here at Plain English, we tell stories about the world to help you improve your English. And in addition to the podcast, you can find exercises and practice opportunities that go along with this story at plainenglish.com/730. It takes me a while to put these episodes together, so this was the first one I was able to do after the results of this month's election were known. By now, you've heard all the news. So in today's story, you'll learn why I think Trump was able to come back to win such a big victory after having lost in 2020. Now, this is my analysis of the situation. Other people will have different opinions, but the great thing is you get to listen, agree or disagree, and maybe learn something. In the second half of the episode, you'll learn the phrasal verb win over. Remember, the full lesson is at plainenglish.com/730. Just a quick note before we start today's episode. I'm hard at work getting our Black Friday specials ready to go, and I don't want you to miss it when it comes out. One thing I can tell you, the Black Friday special is going to include our new Video Lab. It's a new feature of Plain English where our members record videos of themselves answering questions, and they get personal video feedback from me. This is just one of the great ways you can improve with us in Plain English. So if English is a priority for you in 2025, then make Plain English part of your Black Friday plans. Go to plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, and you'll be the first to hear about our specials this year. Now, here's today's story. Here's where things stood in January 2021 when President Donald Trump left office. He had lost his re-election bid. He was widely blamed for inciting, or at least not stopping, a violent invasion of the U.S. Capitol building by his supporters. He had been impeached twice, though not removed from office. He had been caught on tape calling election officials to demand that they find enough votes for him to win. And when that didn't work, he tried to interrupt the ceremonial certification of the 2020 vote. And then, all his options exhausted, he didn't attend the inauguration of his successor, as is customary. He seemed finished. But now, less than 4 years later, the American voters have just handed him a convincing victory. How did this happen? There are plenty of factors that helped bring him back to office, but one person in particular must bear a large portion of the responsibility, and that is his successor, and now predecessor, Joe Biden. You might remember that Biden ran for office in 2020, promising a return to normalcy and pledging to be a transition candidate. People widely interpreted that as a pledge to serve only a single term and to enact a limited centrist agenda. Voters were exhausted of the scandals and drama of Trump's first term in office. They were afraid of the uncertainty of COVID-19. They trusted Biden, a veteran legislator and former vice president. They rewarded him with the presidency and turned Trump away. But soon after he took office, Biden decided to pursue a much bolder agenda than what he promised during his campaign. He signed 2 massive bills. They increased spending in healthcare, green technology, housing, transportation, and economic development. They gave targeted tax cuts to households and subsidies to businesses. And they expanded government offices. Separately, Biden aggressively forgave government student loans. Now, many people did support parts of Biden's agenda, but when you put it all together, it amounted to a staggering amount of spending, subsidies, and debt forgiveness. And although one of the laws was called the Inflation Reduction Act, the spending really supercharged inflation. So point number 1 was Biden promised to be a transitional candidate, but then pursued a very bold agenda that voters had not asked for. Here's point number 2. Biden's administration let a massive issue fester for almost his entire presidency: the southern border. Who can forget this? Trump had implemented harsh and restrictive policies at the U.S.-Mexico border, where migrants cross illegally. Upon taking office, Biden relaxed a lot of these policies. He wanted to treat migrants better, a noble aim. But as America's stance at the border became more humane, it also became much, much more permissive. Potential migrants noticed. Soon, more and more migrants attempted to cross the border, and they started to come from more and more places. Homeless shelters, schools, hospitals, and city services around the country, not just in border towns, they all struggled to accommodate the influx of migrants. American voters can be open to immigration, but this was beyond what they were willing to accept. Illegal immigration has always been Donald Trump's number one strength with his supporters, and Joe Biden handed this issue right back to him on a silver platter. As if that weren't enough, There is a third way that Joe Biden helped Donald Trump, and it is this. It became clear during 2023 and 2024 that Biden was slipping. This was easy for voters to see, but Biden and his advisors insisted that he was fine, that he was the only person who could beat Trump a second time. It was hard to believe these statements if you also watched Biden in public. And then it all blew up. Concerns about Biden's age burst out into the open after his awful debate in June. It then took him 3 agonizing weeks to make the only sensible decision, which was to withdraw from the race. So those were Biden's contributions to Trump's victory. Another Democrat also played an important role in Trump's comeback, and that is a prosecutor in New York State. His name is Alvin Bragg, and he is the one who took the former president to court, charging him with falsifying his business records. The allegation was Trump paid a woman to keep quiet about their affair, and then he called it legal services in his business records. Donald Trump did many outrageous things in office and during his first campaign, but this was not one of them. Very few people are ever charged under this law, but prosecutors aggressively went after Trump for it. Trump used his showman's instinct to turn the trial into a media circus. He expertly played the victim. He claimed that prosecutors were using the law as a weapon against their political enemies. This charge only bolstered his long-standing argument that elites use the government for their own purposes against the common man. He leaned into his stance as a victim. Many voters took his side. You know the saying, if you're going to go after the king, you'd better kill him? Alvin Bragg went after Donald Trump, and Donald Trump came out stronger than ever. Now, what about Kamala Harris? She was in a difficult position. She was Biden's vice president. As you may remember from a previous story, the vice president has very little power, but is associated with the president. So she got a lot of the blame for inflation and immigration, but as a candidate, she chose not to repudiate Joe Biden on any issue. She also ran a very cautious campaign based on her biography and her personal contrast with Trump. Her biggest issue was abortion, but that didn't motivate voters as much as she thought it would. Ultimately, she had only 105 days as the candidate. Her campaign operation was very good, but the message and the messenger and the timing just weren't right for voters this year. Now, this may seem like I'm crediting only Democrats with Trump's victory, but Trump and his campaign deserve a lot of credit too. First, you must say this for Donald John Trump. He never gave up. In his lowest moment, he stayed defiant and started plotting his comeback. He also never stopped being himself, not even after he was shot in the head. Trump has a unique bond with his supporters going back years. All during the campaign, he was bombastic, profane, vulgar, chaotic, rambling, and untruthful. But this is why people like him. This is a feature, not a bug. But one thing in Trump's world did change: the professionalism of his campaign. His 2024 campaign was far more disciplined than his previous campaigns. He had more professional managers, and his campaign stuck to a strategy. Yes, he indulged himself by repeatedly claiming the 2020 election was stolen from him. Yes, his campaign rallies were rambling, often incoherent streams of consciousness. Yes, he lost his cool at a debate, but he and his campaign focused like a laser on two things: prices are too high, and people are streaming into the country unfairly. He never stopped talking about these two issues. They were very important to voters, and he pinned them both squarely on Biden. When Kamala Harris replaced Biden on the ballot, Trump didn't miss a beat. He tied Harris to the policies of the president she served. Harris chose not to distance herself from Biden on a single issue. When asked if she would do anything differently from Joe Biden if she had been president, she said she couldn't think of a single thing she would do differently than the current unpopular president. Donald Trump is now just the second person in American history to have lost the presidency and then to have won it again. The only other person to do it was Grover Cleveland in 1892. Trump will be both the 45th and 47th president. Now, typically, presidents who are re-elected win a smaller majority the second time. But that is not true this time. Trump's 2024 victory was big, a lot bigger than what he won in 2016. The Republicans also took control of both houses of the legislature, and conservatives hold a majority on the Supreme Court. So that means the full power of the national government will be with Trump and his allies starting on January 20th, 2025. Win over is the phrasal verb you're going to learn today. This first appeared in episode number 229. It was about Domino's Pizza. You guys know Domino's Pizza, right? Super American. Well, they were planning to open their first stores in, wait for it, Italy. And the question was whether they would be able to win over Italian pizza fans. This episode came out in the beginning of 2020. And in 2022, 2 years later, Domino's closed all its stores in Italy. So, spoiler alert, Domino's did not win over Italian consumers. And now, here's what win over means. The expression I'd like to share with you today is to win over. It's a phrasal verb that means you're finally convincing someone to like you or to like your idea after that person originally opposed the idea. That's important with win over. You have to persuade someone that's against you at first to be on your side. Here's how you heard it just a few moments ago. There is the outside chance. There is the possibility that Domino's will win over the local Italian population. It's possible that they will persuade the Italians to like American-style pizza delivered to their doorsteps. The local population is currently skeptical. We didn't talk too much about it earlier, but a lot of people in Italy are not really in favor of this Americanized version of their cuisine, especially people who like artisanal Neapolitan pizza. But there is the possibility that Domino's will win them over. There is the possibility that Domino's will persuade them to like American-style pizza. There's a funny quirk with win over, and that is the placement of the object. You either put the object right in the middle, win me over, or you put it at the end, win over the local population. Now, there isn't really a rule for whether you put the object in the middle, win her over, or at the end, win over the pizza-loving nation, but it's more of a general guideline. If your object is just a word or two, you can sandwich it in between win and over. Win her over, win him over, win them over, win her family over, win your boss over. But if the object is long, like a lot of words, then it's better to put it after, like win over the local population, win over skeptical moderate voters, win over fans of the opposite team, things like that. So let's practice this a little more. In this example, I'm going to use win over twice. Once with a long object coming after, and once with a short object coming in between win and over. Listen for them in this example. Do you remember the movie Crazy Rich Asians? We talked about it on episode 130. Rachel went with Nick to Singapore to meet Nick's family. Nick's mother, Eleanor, was not crazy about the idea of her son marrying an American who didn't know Asian culture. Rachel's future mother-in-law was against her for most of the movie. But at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, Nick re-proposes to Rachel with Eleanor's ring in a signal that Eleanor had finally given her blessing. What did Nick and Rachel do to win over the matriarch of the family? Rachel sat down at a traditional mahjong table with Eleanor, and she played that traditional board game with her. She also tells Eleanor that she's declining Nick's marriage proposal because she doesn't have the support of his family. We don't see the scene in which Nick gets Eleanor's blessing, but it's clear that the mahjong game is what Rachel does to win Eleanor over in the end. Did you hear the two instances of win over? At first I asked, what did Nick and Rachel do to win over the matriarch of the family? The matriarch of the family is a long object. It's a mouthful. So we put it after win over. But then later I said that the mahjong game is what Rachel does to win Eleanor over in the end. Now, Eleanor is just a single word, so we put it in between win and over. One more quick example. In a tennis match, it's common for the spectators to shift their loyalties during the match. They might cheer for one player at the beginning, but the other player might do something to win them over. The other player might scrap and fight and come from behind, eventually winning over the cheering crowd. Win them over and win over the cheering crowd. That's all for this episode of Plain English. Remember to get the full story, the transcript, in-app translations, exercises, and other practice opportunities at plainenglish.com/730. See you back here on Thursday. Great job in Plain English today. If you want to make faster progress in English in 2025, then you'll want to be part of Plain English Plus. I'm cooking up a great Black Friday promotion. Now, it's not ready yet, but you can be the first to know if you go to plainenglish.com/black, BLACK, plainenglish.com/black, and you can get a head start on our great Black Friday specials. Check out that link in the show notes or just type plainenglish.com/black into your browser now.